Welcome to the Smarter Leadership Podcast, where we explore the power of leadership, from overcoming challenges to shaping cultures and building a lasting legacy. Through inspiring stories and insights from our guests, we'll share transformative lessons to help you thrive in today's interconnected world. I'm Tucci Ivowi. Join us for conversations that will inspire thought and action. Sika Goka is a certified etiquette coach and hospitality consultant, trained at the British School of Etiquette in the UK. Known for her dynamic style, Sika has built a devoted following by making etiquette accessible and relatable. She combines practical training with a flair for creativity, ensuring her clients not only learn but also enjoy the process. Additionally, she partners with various establishments to elevate their hospitality standards through customized training and management consulting, leaving a lasting impact on both teams and customers. Sika, you are, as an etiquette coach, as a hospitality consultant, you are uniquely positioned as a manager of managers. How do you manage people's egos and, everything that comes with managing managers?
I literally take every single day one at a time. And I've learned over the years not to sort of treat everybody in exactly the same manner. We're complex human beings. We have different temperaments. We have different ideologies. And I've realized over the years that, one approach is not one fits all. And it's allowed me to develop myself in return.
Tell me something. What was your childhood like, and how do you feel that has helped you in the work that you're doing today in managing people?
Okay. So I'm blessed that I came from a very loving and supportive family. I also grew up with not just my immediate siblings, but very close family members and close cousins as well. This is something that we, as children, we saw modeled from our parents, who were also very close with their siblings. So, having extended family, aunts, uncles, first cousins, where we were very, very close-knit, and therefore you never really felt alone. But I believe that my particular position in my family, being the middle child, gave me a different sort of perspective. We all know that as a middle child, you're never the first to do anything, and neither are you the last. And therefore, you get to watch your older siblings do everything, and sort of you mimic them to some degree. And then you're not quite the eldest, but then you still have some influence over the one that comes behind you. So I've always been in a position where I've been able to observe, emulate some of the wonderful things that you taught me growing up, and then also being able to pass down and be a comfort to my brother as well.
You've just given me some insight, because to function effectively, whether in a corporate environment, whether in a startup, you need to manage up as well as down. You need to be able to get people to deliver. If you are someone who has no command or has no influence over how even your bosses work, you'll struggle to get far. And so this middle child story that you've just shared is pretty interesting, because people, those who are effective, I've noticed in the corporate environments in which I've been operating over a number of decades now, you see that people who really are effective, who are strong, are able to manage their teams who work under them, but they're also able to work very well with their bosses or their line managers and so on. So that's interesting. I'm taking notes of that. I want us to spend a few moments talking about what you do on the business etiquette side of things, and how that translates into strong management skills in a sense.
Okay, that's a really good question. When I started the etiquette, my primary focus was actually on children initially, but as time would have it, I realized that there's value in being able to step into the corporate space. I realized that you have lots of individuals transitioning from one career to another. A lot of the time it also means that they're also mixing with people from a completely different background to themselves, and they themselves are coming out of one demographic and moving into another. Right. Within the corporate etiquette training that I do, besides curating each particular session or workshop for that particular organization, there's some things that are always fundamental as part of the training. When you have individuals coming together and they're trying to work, sometimes you're going in to sort of teach them about a little bit of conflict resolution, because naturally in the workplace you're working with people, 8 hours or so a day. Different personalities have different ways of reacting to things, and you need to be able to guide people. With that said, you wouldn't be able to do this without emotional intelligence as well. So that's one of the cornerstones of what I teach as part of my training. The ability to understand yourself and therefore how you come across to others is a real strength. And it also allows you to be judicial about the way that you go about influencing people, as well as your reactions to things. And people find a lot of value in being able to understand that, okay, I didn't realize that I am super sensitive, or I can go from 0 to 100 very quickly, and that I don't take feedback very well. There's always a part of it that you sort of have to do a self-assessment and reflect on your own behavior, and then you realize that it's through that you can now empathize with other people, and therefore you are able to lead, direct, coach, develop them as a team lead more effectively than if you only did things from one particular perspective.
Clearly I know a lot about
Yes.
you, and I can say that, people call you, on the one hand, matron. That's been one of your nicknames, but at the same time, people come to you for a listening ear to really share their problems, their issues with. These are two kind of different roles. At the same time, you're an etiquette coach. It looks, especially from what you've just shared, that your lifestyle has kind of inured you naturally into this role, but you're also human.
Yes.
And certainly there will be things that tick you off. So when something happens to really kind of make you explode, how do you compose yourself, especially in a public setting where you are there and known publicly as an etiquette coach? How do you manage that kind of anger or emotion?
So that's a really good question, but I realized that ability developed a long time ago. So the thing about being called a matron is funny, because yes, I'm not the eldest in my family, but I realized that a lot of the time I was indulged and I was allowed to sort of be a bit bossy. But I realized that it was done in such a clever way, probably by you and my parents, to allow me to do the things that maybe you guys didn't want to do. And especially when it came to organizing the house and things like that. It wasn't until much later that I realized that you're also very particular about the way that things are done, but you sort of allowed me to appear to be the one who wanted everything straightened out, maybe because you just thought, well, there's somebody else to do it and I don't really have to. So it was such a clever thing, and our parents naturally encouraged that sort of behavior as well, because it made our bond very tight. They also like the fact that, yes, there's a hierarchy within the family and the dynamics, but every so often I'm also allowed to come out of my shell and sort of develop those strong characteristics which have served me later on in life. Now, when I recall, this took me back to the early 2000s, having graduated from university, and in my first sort of role as a manager when I was working in the UK within the Barclays Group for the Woolwich as a branch manager. I was very keen to develop myself, and I started off, as a regular cashier. I then had the keys to the safe as a supervisor, and an opening came up to manage the same branch where I was actually trained in. And I applied for the job. And, after a few assessments, I was sort of given like a conditional offer. My bosses at the time said, okay, we're going to give you this chance, but it's going to come with a caveat. What was that caveat? Well, we're going to give you a particular member of staff who we know to be quite difficult, challenging, even for the more experienced managers. If you can make it, do you know what I mean? Then you're going to be one of the best managers ever. But if you can't make it, well, do you know what I mean? We'll try and find a substitute to see if they would then want the role instead. I didn't really take the whole thing seriously. I was very self-confident at the time, because I saw that I had a passion for doing the job and doing it well. So much so that, there were other people that had been there a lot longer than me, but didn't have the confidence to really go for this promotion. And I was happy to step up to the plate and for the challenge, because I wanted to advance my career. as the journey began, I didn't realize that this individual was going to test me so much. Almost every single thing that I asked them to do, they wouldn't do it. They would find an excuse for doing the most simple things, like going to another branch to relieve cover when somebody was off sick. And it was something that I was happy to do. You'd have your mortgage seller happy to do it. You'd have some of your other supervisors go and cover another branch when they're short-staffed, but he would refuse, and he'd come up with all sorts of excuses, things like, oh, I don't want to go to that area because back in 1965 a bomb went off, or, you know, the only way to get to that branch is from a tube, and I don't really like tubes because, you know, I'm always worried about a terrorist attack. So he had all sorts of excuses for things, and there wasn't really much I could do. Then I'd have to go myself. I realized that he was quite determined to antagonize me, and I also realized that I had to be very, very smart, because he was constantly undermining me in front of everybody else, and everybody was waiting and watching to see what would happen. I was also determined that I wasn't going to have you know, a nervous breakdown, or even have some kind of shouting match with him to show him my level of authority against his, because that's exactly what he was doing. He was inciting a situation that I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of being the victor. But I realized that sort of calmness came from watching somebody like my father, who you rarely ever see get himself worked up for anything. He's always calm in the face of adversity. And yourself, you're also very, very similar. You may be seething on the inside, but you're not going to give somebody the satisfaction of seeing it. I realized for me that so much was at stake that I was determined to beat him at his own game. And I did that just diligently, watching everything that he did. Every single time I had a conversation with him to sort of advise him what he should be doing, instead of all the negative things that he was doing, which was actually affecting our branch performance. But I stayed the course, and basically I'd written out, you know, almost a daily dialogue of every conversation that we had, every time that he fell short, that he wasn't performing his duties up to task, that he was basically not being a team player, and sometimes not being compliant, because, you know, we were working in the banking environment, and you have to do things according to the Financial Services Act. So it came down to the time of appraisals, and what I'd realized is that his history was that he would always do things that fell short, but in the last quarter of the year, just as you get to the last final appraisal, he would sort of improve his performance to allow him to get enough credits to be able to move on and not be sanctioned and not be fired or anything like that. So here we were, my first time as a manager doing performance appraisals, and then it came to his turn. And, you know, I could see right from the onset, as we started our dialogue, he was very ready to sort of threaten me. And I realized in that conversation, he was actually highly irritated by the fact that he felt that, you know, he had been in the company for so much longer, at the time 5 years, and I was, you know, just coming in, and that I didn't deserve the position. I didn't deserve to be his manager because he knew so much more than me. So anyway, we began the appraisal, and I was scoring him on certain competencies, and I was able to demonstrate to him where he fell short. And then he said to me, well, that's just a lie, that I was conspiring against him, and that he was going to send me to industrial tribunal, and that I've been picking on him ever since he started.
Wow.
So then I said, actually, that's not the truth. So I was able to take out my notebook and show him dates and times and our verbal conversations that we had that were handwritten by me, because in those days we were using a very old system. We didn't even have like Word or anything like that to actually keep a diary, so it was kept by hand and date. And I kept it in the safe at work. He was so shocked by the fact that I kept all of this information, and he found it very hard to then turn it around and sort of accuse me. He was able to see in that moment, everything was documented, and he was able to see in that moment what kind of an employee he really was. The last thing that he actually said to me was that, you know, at the end of the day, he still doesn't get it, because he's had 5 years experience and I've barely even had like a year. And I said to him, well, actually, no, you've had 1 year's experience, which you've repeated 4 times. So you didn't actually get the opportunity to develop or learn anything from your first year, which is why you're in this situation. Anyway, the long and short of it is that the very next day, he actually handed in his resignation letter, which was a huge triumph for the entire company, because apparently he was such a problem employee that they'd been trying to sack for the last 3 or 4 years, but they just didn't have enough evidence to be able to do it. So naturally, I got lots of calls and congratulations from, heads of the areas and directors telling me, and they couldn't believe it because they're like, where did you come from? Like, you're this rookie and you've managed to do this. But I realized that it's learned behavior, being able to watch very calm and loving parents, how they handle things, how they speak to people, always with respect, but still get the best out of people. And then knowing that there's a time and place for, coming out of character or showing your true feelings, but sometimes you have to apply a little bit of wisdom so that you can be one step ahead. And that, I would say, is what the foundations for my approach to management and leadership has been.
That's
ever
wonderful.
Since then.
So, I mean, so we can see that some of those early experiences have really kind of toughened you up and given you that, critical skill, in a sense. It's also, that example is also a really beautiful one of how you can be tough without ever raising your voice, without creating panic or commotion. So I'm really glad you shared that story. But again, I'm going back to this word tough, for 2 reasons. One thing that you and I have in common, and have had in common ever since we were young, was a love of period dramas.
Yes.
Maybe for different reasons. I don't know why you love them so much. I know why I love them, and I'd like to talk about that.
I believe that my love for period dramas really stems from the fact that I really do have an admiration and almost like a longing for a time when people behaved in a particular way. When, I'm sorry to say it because I know that nobody is about talking with this sort of language these days, but when ladies were ladies and men were gentlemen, really, I have an admiration for me, simply what that means is about carrying yourself in a way that is respectful, not just to yourself but to other people as well. And I love a time when people respected the order of things, the hierarchy of things, paying particular attention to the social nuances, the tiny little details, which showed that you cared for other people as well as yourself. And that is really my love for period dramas, as well as the old English. I'm a lover for reading novels. I love some of the classics. I love the old films, just like you said. And to sort of be able to bring all of that back to life again, it thrills me and it excites me. I'll never turn down the opportunity to
well,
go
you bring
down
some
in
of
history.
It to life in your day-to-day as an etiquette coach. So it's wonderful to be able to marry, your passions, with your craft. So that's a wonderful thing. So,
yes.
Have you ever been disappointed in yourself?
Yes, I have. Sometimes the disappointment comes from the lack of self-belief. I've heard you often talk about the imposter syndrome, and sometimes, I'm able to talk myself out of doing things that really and truly I probably should have, if I had a bit more self-belief. It also took me quite a long time to gain confidence as an etiquette coach, as passionate as I am about doing that kind of work, because it really is the work that I do that I derive so much joy from. I'm never worried, even if I've had like a few hours of sleep. I know that I'm going to be so charged and so pumped, because every different session, every different entity, every individual gives me a different sort of value, and I learn as much as I'm able to impart some knowledge. I'm also learning as part of it. But that, it took me quite a while to gain the confidence to do it, simply because I sort of, had this image of and worrying about what people may think, which is, who does she think she is, bringing etiquette? Why does she assume that she's going to be the authority on telling people what to do and how they should behave? My approach has never, ever been about telling people what they don't know. My approach has always been, if you want to know something, or if you would like to apply yourself, or if you want to, develop in this particular area, then I'm the one that's going to help you. I also generally, sometimes I'm a bit shy, depending on the social setting I find myself in coming out right to say what I do, because immediately people feel intimidated, especially when it's around food. They're always like, oh, now we've got to be on our best behavior. There's an etiquette coach here. She's probably going to be watching everything that I do. But, once again, it's not really about what people don't know. It's really about what they were exposed to. And the reality of it is most of us could probably do with a little bit of help brushing up on certain things. And the fact that etiquette is so unique to the environment that you found yourself in. It's not the same everywhere. You know, growing up in England, there's certain things that were never really an issue. How we greet people, accepting and receiving things with our left hand. It's not particularly an insult, but here it is seen as something that's bad-mannered and can be quite offensive. That's why you'd hear things like, sorry for my left. So now I've sort of gained the confidence in saying and being able to tell people quite clearly what it is that I do, and I've mastered the ability to do it in a way that it's still very welcoming and warm without making people feel like I'm the matron that I know I can be.
I think that's the thing. I think you've made it very relatable.
Yes.
And letting people understand that, there is such a thing as etiquette across the world, and it shows up differently in different countries and different cultures, but it's there. And when you help them to understand it like that, I think they appreciate it all the more so. I mean, I've seen some of your sessions or classes and interactions, and I see people really appreciate it, and that's a wonderful thing at the end of the day. We're all here to learn, to grow, and it's the little things that make a difference.
My absolute joy is at the end of the session, whether it's a one-day session or a two-day session, to see the transformation in people, and the fact that they realize that this isn't some foreign thing, that is some antiquated, outdated notion, that it's very relevant today, and that because of the things that they've learned in the session, it's going to help them in their careers, on their personal journeys, and help them to have better interactions with other people. And that really is the point of it all.
So I'm going to pick up on that word joy. What else can you share that really brings you joy in life and helps you to kind of keep you balanced and really live what you might call your best life?
Okay. Well, I did mention that I do love reading. I love a bit of escapism. I must say that I do love a bit of a mystery. I used to watch things, especially Agatha Christie's, a bit of a murder mystery. I like reading novels. I like to, be transported into a different time in a different place, but also just be able to leave everyday cares and worries away. I also love to entertain. That's something that I have in common with my daughter. We're both very keen and avid cooks, but, she's so developed now that most of the time I don't even need to do much, and she's happy to take control. But I love to open my house out, is particularly to my family. We're often together on Sundays. That's always my happy place, being around my parents and my siblings and our children, and being able just to share in family time. It's a real blessing. There was a time when we lived in different countries, and I think that as individuals, as human beings, it's really, really nice when you're in the same place as your family members, as the people that love you the most, the people that hold you accountable, the people that encourage you, the people that you can rely on. There's something very enriching about knowing that you can see them at any given time. And so that's really how I spend my days when I'm not working. My weekends are full, and at least there's one day of the weekend that I'm spending with them. But the truth is, it happens multiple times throughout the week, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
How do you want people to feel when they're in your company?
Relaxed. I want them to feel relaxed because, the truth is, I'm not somebody who takes myself too seriously. I know it sounds like a contradiction because I am an etiquette coach, and part of it is actually teaching people the do's and don'ts of life. But the reality of it is that you realize that a lot of these things we're sort of learning as part of our development anyway, from childhood to adulthood. But for me, it's about paying particular attention to the environment that you find yourself in, and knowing that there's an approach to do things that will stop people feeling offended by things that you do, even though that wasn't necessarily your intention, or just giving you a more polished approach to do things so that people take you more seriously as a business person, as an employee, as a representative of a company.
A lot of us, our values, we walk with them. They are kind of written on our shoulders. We live out our values. But do you have any that you maybe hold dear to you but you haven't shared?
For me, I think it fundamentally is about respect for other people. And you know.
But I think you do share this, even in your work, all the time.
But, you know, once again, it's inspired. It's inspired by the people that I admire the most. I remember when I moved here from the UK, I think it was in 2005 or so, there was literally one salon that we always used to go to in Osu, and it got very busy on Friday afternoons. But after work, you know, one would queue up because they were the standard. They knew what they were doing. And occasionally, Dad would come and pick me up. And when he comes to pick me up, he would actually go in and greet every single one of the hairstylists there. And I would see the joy on everybody's face because they felt acknowledged. And they would say, you know, the gentleman came in and he greeted us all. And I thought that's such a wonderful thing, you know, and it's such an inspiring thing to be able to impact people just from something so little as acknowledging them and greeting them. Because you can imagine, you know, every single day people are going about their business. We're always moving around. We've got all sorts of things on our minds, and we forget the little things, which is just to be able to look somebody in the eye, say hello to them, ask them how they're doing, and how it truly impacts their day on such a positive note. And I'd like to believe that those sort of things have been passed down.
And that is impact. That is really the definition of impact.
And then when it comes to smiling at people, once again, that was taught. Our mum is probably known as one of the warmest people, and she's always ready with a smile and a hug and things like that. So, you know, she instilled in those sorts of things in us, and so it means that generally we're very approachable. You may not know me, you may see things on Instagram, but if you're in my presence, you're going to be guaranteed that I'm going to address you with the respect that you deserve as a human being, but also warmly, because, you know, you see people, but you never know how they're going to impact your life as well. So you're always excited. And it's that same thing that I always have high expectations when I go into my training, because I literally always have a good time. And I can do it over and over again. And I'd like to believe that after being in my company, you also feel very much at ease. You feel impacted in a positive way. And anything that, you know, you learn, you're able to then go and use in your daily life, and also impact the lives of the people around you as well.
I spoke earlier about, you know, the fact that people like to come to you to talk about their problems, and, you know, how you really have time to listen to them. And I'm wondering, because one other thing I know we have in common is this passion for mental health and mental wellness. Are the two connected? Can you just talk a bit about this?
I definitely believe that the two things are connected one way or another. You know, fundamentally, I'm interested in people, and I'm interested in people's minds, why they do what they do. So I'm forever on this journey of researching people's characters and mental illnesses as well. And even though I'm not in any way an expert, I do have a limited knowledge of some various mild cases of mental illness. Now, not to say that everybody who comes to talk to me is of that, you know, suffers any mental illness. But the thing is, I do have compassion for people, and I do like to be there when people feel like they want to talk. What I've come to realize is that a lot of the time it's not even necessarily people that are my close friends or in my close network. Sometimes it's just a stranger. They just feel like, for whatever reason, they want to be able to share something with me. And, you know, the reason why I take the time to listen to people is because you never know what a person's particular struggle is. We know that people are so inundated these days with so many issues and so many problems, and a lot of people feel like there's no way out. By lending my ear, if I then just give brief comfort to somebody, you know, in whatever small way, and puts them, you know, on a path, and maybe even just allows them to sleep better that night, because, you know, they say that a problem shared is a problem halved, then I feel like I've done what I'm supposed to do. I don't necessarily have all the answers, and I'm in no way sort of trying to say that I'm an expert in the field, but what I have is ears, and I can use them to do what they're supposed to do, which is primarily to listen and just be there for somebody. So that's something that happens actually more often than people know. The reality of it is I've always felt very blessed with the relationships that I do have. I wouldn't say I'm somebody who has loads and loads of friends, but I do believe that I have very, very deep connections with the people that I'm close to. And naturally, having a sister, I've always had somebody I can talk to. Having a brother, I've always had people who always treat me without judgment, with love and care.
So Sika, have there been a series of events or a particular event that has significantly impacted the way you view things, or has had, an impact, negative or positive, on your life and, where you are today?
I would probably say my transition from living in the UK to Ghana. When you grow up as an African, as a Ghanaian in the UK, you very much identify with your home country. My mum, speaks her dialect, which is Ga, with her sisters and things like that. So I'd always grown up understanding the language, and it's always made me feel connected to my ethnicity, my tribe, and definitely, a part of my culture. But it wasn't until I moved here that I realized that a lot of Ghanaians don't see me as an authentic Ghanaian. So that was quite shocking for me. When you're in the UK and you meet other Ghanaians, you just feel a sense of camaraderie because you're from the same place. But when you move here, you realize that there's actually a lot of tribalism, and it's not just good enough just to be Ghanaian. The fact that, there are cliques within the culture. So that also taught me that there's a lot that I don't know about my culture, but it also told me that there's also something that I could teach about a different culture, and for those who wanted to know. So the two things, I've been on a journey about learning more things about being a Ghanaian, and at the same time too, I've been teaching a sort of international standard of etiquette as well to others.
Clearly, you overcame that because, we were speaking earlier about how you've displayed and shown and taught that etiquette there are global standards, but it's also very much linked to culture. And a lot of the examples that you've used in your teachings, in your trainings, have centered around Ghanaian culture and how, people are expected to do things here, and you encourage that. So I guess, that's a journey that's been a journey in and of itself, and you've been able to blend the two. Do you want to shed a bit more insight on that?
Yeah, I mean, it started being thrust into the corporate environment, and just actually, even though I went from banking to banking, this is back in 2005 when I came to do a short stint here for about a year, and I was part of the pioneering team of Fidelity Bank as they transitioned from a discount house. So they got their universal banking license. So I joined the team here at the head office. And luckily for me, there were other people in my situation as well. But most of them were Ghanaians who maybe had gone to school abroad and things like that. So there was a dynamic way of thinking from the leadership right down. But it was more about the back office things, the cultural dynamics. Somehow it was equated that working very long hours meant that you were doing a lot of work. For me, that was the opposite. I believe that you can be extremely efficient within a certain amount of time. I also struggled to understand why certain things couldn't be done in a very short space of time, like generating an account for somebody. And that's why I was happy that the company also saw the value in being able to do a lot of the things that would have previously taken like a few days to achieve, when we were able to turn around those sort of things very, very quickly. But I realized that if I wanted to be able to manage my expectations, but also to integrate well into the society, I had to sort of have a shift. That's not to say necessarily lower my standards and do things differently, but to understand that, there's two ways to skin a cat. And I had to pause. I had to sort of study what was valuable to people here so that I could connect with them, and then, sort of have people on my side so that we could achieve our agendas together. So I did learn a little bit more patience, I guess. I learned to sort of read in between the lines, because it's not everything that is taught to you so obviously. Some things you have to learn.
Now that you can say that you've more or less fully integrated, despite one or two areas that are unique to you, what would you now say is one of your favorite things about being a Ghanaian or living in Ghana?
Well, I love Ghanaian food. I think it's one of the more flavorful types of cuisines that we have in the world. I also love some of our traditional ceremonies, particularly the traditional wedding. I love the vibrant colors of our kente, and I actually really appreciate the formalities. Of course, I don't understand all of the dialects, but at least with the Ga, when I see the ceremony going on and you have the representative for each side being very animated, going through what they need to go through, all of the requirements, but still adding an element of comedy to it. It makes it very, very enjoyable. And, you know, having observed and attended several weddings, I always find that on those particular occasions, people are a lot more relaxed. They tend to enjoy themselves so much more, especially the bride and groom, than they do probably on their, what we would call their white wedding, their church weddings. And maybe it's because of the ease of the ceremony and them just feeling like royalty because they are adorned in their traditional wear, and maybe because of, you know, the less formal aspect of the whole pictures and the ceremonies and all the things that happened with the white wedding, that it's just a lot more beautiful, it's a lot more intimate, and I enjoy observing those a lot.
Tell me, have you ever seen any etiquette faux pas at any of these such ceremonies?
Yes. You know, I love dance, I love music, and I love, you know, to be a part of a ceremony. But these days we are seeing quite a number of sort of what I would consider vulgar movements on the dance floor, represented by both the friends of the bride as well as the groom. And, you know, it's nice to have these formations, but I think that people also need to be aware that as much as everybody's getting into the spirit, you do have members of and representatives of the families that are there who wouldn't necessarily want to witness some of these.
So you were talking about, you know, friends of the bride and groom coming together, doing their dances and so on. And talking about friends, you know, Ghana is a very sociable place. People walk around in big cliques, big groups of friends. Have you ever felt disadvantaged not having gone to school here and making, you know, these large groups of friends that are so common in this culture, in this society?
Absolutely. You know, there's a running joke that I have, in fact, with you, that we often say that who's going to come to our funeral when we die, because we just don't have the network. Look, when you don't grow up here, look, let me even go back. I have noticed more and more that a lot of people have actually, they've remained friends with people that they met even as young as kindergarten. So their entire lives, they've grown up. And even at one point where maybe one or two of them have gone to school abroad, they still managed to come back. And that's a beautiful thing to see, a friendship that has spanned over several decades. To be honest, it's very uncommon in the UK. I can barely even remember anybody that I went to primary school with. Even secondary school, I think there's one person or two that I'm still friends with today. And uni, you know, most of us, we've even lost touch. So I do believe that I have missed out on having that kind of friendship that would have lasted and spanned over the years. And, you know, once again, talking about those cultural things, in the UK, I don't think I ever went to a funeral. It was the weirdest thing to hear that you're going to go to a funeral of somebody that you've never met. But here, I realized that it's about supporting the bereaved individual. And there's something so nice about being able to turn up for them at their most significant time of need, and just, you know, show your support in that way. And it's something that now I really appreciate and value and make the time to go to.
Yeah, I was actually going to mention that, you know, when we make those jokes about no one showing up at our funerals, the beautiful side of it is the fact that people really, really show up in their numbers for each other, like just like you're saying. And it's something which, unless you're here to witness it, unless you're in Ghana and attend one of these funerals, it's kind of hard to understand or to grasp. But it's one of the things that makes, you know, brings out that beauty in that, you know, communion that Ghanaians share. So yeah, it's a wonderful thing.
Absolutely. Because it's a mind shift. You know, when you're there, you would seem like a strange person to want to go to a funeral of somebody that you've never met. But the reality of it is, it's actually a very sad way of looking at things, because it's not about the person who's being buried, it's about their loved ones. And that's what we're really, really good at doing here, is turning up for the people that we care about and support, and showing love and support to them when they're going to be missing their family members. So it's once again, it's one of the beauties of our culture that I really am happy that I've come to understand and appreciate and just go with, really.
So I'd like you to share maybe a last word for anyone who's listening. What would you advise them in the space of taking care of themselves?
I would say that, look, if you have any sort of passion in life, to pursue it. I also believe that we should be taking care of ourselves. There is a huge connection between the way that you present yourself and the way that you're going to behave. So if you're not particularly feeling great, or you're feeling nervous about a job, or an interview that you have coming up, put on your best clothes, put on that power outfit, and give yourself a little pep talk and believe that you are a winner, because that is half the journey. I'm also a firm believer that you should experiment with things that you don't really know, whether it's food and whether it's a form of entertainment. But I also believe in nourishing the body, so exercise is also very, very important to me. So all of those sort of things have a direct impact on your mental health, in that how you see yourself, and all those things can be very uplifting for your mood. Spending time loving yourself, developing yourself, reading about things that you have more interest in going to investigate things that you don't really have the answers to. All of those things sort of keep your mind busy and keep you motivated. And I think that we all owe it to ourselves to be kind to ourselves, and when we're kind to ourselves, it makes it easier to be kind to other people as well. So that's it.
Thank you so much, Sika. As always, I've enjoyed chatting with you. We'll take it offline, we'll continue, but I'd love to have you back again one day on the show.
And it would be a pleasure to be back.
Thank you so much.
Thank you too.